I lay frozen in my childhood bedroom, my body locked in place, my mind screaming while my lungs barely worked. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could only listen. Footsteps crossed the hallway, slow, deliberate. The door didn't close. It stayed slightly open. From the darkness outside, my sister whispered, calm and steady, "Just make it look natural." A man I had never seen before stepped into the room. He leaned over me and checked my pulse. That was when I realized something far worse than death was happening, because whoever he wasn't there to save me. I lay frozen in my childhood bedroom, unable to move, unable to scream, my body heavy like it no longer belonged to me. I could hear everything. Footsteps in the hallway. Slow, careful, intentional. The door didn't shut. It stayed slightly open. From the other side, my sister's voice whispered, calm and controlled, "Just make it look natural." A man stepped into the room, a stranger. He leaned over my bed and checked my pulse like this was routine. That's when I understood the truth. This wasn't an accident. And whoever he was waiting for next wasn't me. It was family who needed me gone. My name is Rachel. I'm 37 years old, and for most of my life, I learned how to disappear without leaving the room. I live in Virginia now, far from the house where I grew up. I work as a senior data analyst. It's a quiet job that rewards patience and precision. I like numbers because they don't care who you are. They don't play favorites. If something doesn't add up, the truth eventually shows itself. My family never worked that way. On the surface, we look normal. A neat house in a quiet Pennsylvania town, family photos lining the hallway, holiday dinners that smelled like roasted turkey and burnt rolls. If you walked in once a year, you'd think everything was fine. But inside that house, there were roles, and mine was always the extra. My father, Richard, liked control more than conversation. He spoke in conclusions, not questions. My mother, Gloria, learned long ago that silence kept the peace. And my younger sister, Lena, she was the center of gravity. Loud, charming, always sure the room was watching her. Growing up, I learned early that praise wasn't evenly distributed. If Lena did well, it was proof of good parenting. If I did well, it was luck, or coincidence, or quietly ignored. The only person who ever really saw me was my grandmother, Eleanor. She used to let me sit with her at the kitchen table long after everyone else left. She'd slide a mug of tea toward me and say, "You notice things. That matters." When she died, the house felt colder, emptier. At her funeral, I remember watching my father's face. No tears, just relief. At the time, I told myself grief looks different on everyone. Before she passed, Grandma Eleanor gave me a small tin box. "Don't open this in front of your father," she said. "When you're truly on your own, you'll understand." I never opened it. I thought it was sentimental, harmless. Years later, when my mother had knee surgery, I drove back to Pennsylvania to help. 2 weeks off work, just long enough to slip back into old habits, cooking, cleaning, staying out of the way. A few days before I left Virginia, I received a letter about unreported income, a large amount, money I'd never seen. I brushed it off as a mistake. I wish I hadn't. Because that letter wasn't an error. It was the first crack in something my family had been hiding for years. The first few days back in that house felt familiar in the worst way. I woke up early to make coffee my mother barely touched. I helped her to the couch, changed her bandages, sorted her pills into neat little rows for the week. My father hovered in doorways, offering instructions instead of help. Lena stopped by twice, both times dressed like she was heading somewhere better. She took photos with Mom on the couch, arm draped just right, smile angled for the camera. Taking care of her, she posted. Then she was gone within 20 minutes. No one questioned it. They never did. By the fourth night, exhaustion sat deep in my bones. The house had a way of draining you quietly, like a slow leak you don't notice until you're empty. That evening, Lena appeared in my doorway holding a mug. "You've been doing a lot," she said, softer than I'd heard her sound in years. "This will help you sleep." The tea smelled faintly sweet. Chamomile, maybe, or something pretending to be. I hesitated just long enough to feel foolish for hesitating. She was my sister. This was my childhood home. I took the mug and drank it. Within half an hour, my legs went first. It wasn't dramatic, just a strange heaviness, like my body had decided it was done listening to me. I tried to stand and didn't make it past the edge of the bed. My arms followed, then my fingers. Panic surged, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. I was awake, fully awake, trapped. Through the narrow opening of my door, I saw a sliver of hallway light. A shadow passed, then stopped. Lena's voice floated in low and controlled. Just do what Dad asked. The door didn't open all the way. It stayed slightly ajar. Footsteps crossed the threshold. He moved carefully like someone who didn't want to leave marks. I couldn't turn my head, but I felt the mattress dip beside me. 2 fingers pressed against my neck, checking my pulse. She's still breathing, the man muttered. This wasn't supposed to hit her this hard. My stomach dropped. Lower your voice, Lena snapped. She won't remember anything. I wanted to scream. I wanted to fight. Instead, I stared at the ceiling, watching a crack I remembered from when I was 12. Dad said this is the only way, Lena continued. Once the hearing happens, it won't matter. Hearing. That word cut through the fog sharper than anything else. This wasn't about me resting. This wasn't concern. This was a plan. The man hesitated. This feels wrong. You're already here, Lena said. Just make it look natural. They left the room. The door clicked softly shut, and in that silence, something inside me shifted. This wasn't sibling rivalry. This wasn't neglect. This was deliberate. My family wasn't trying to protect me. They were trying to erase me. And whatever that upcoming hearing was, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. If I stayed in that house until morning, I wouldn't leave it on my own terms. Time stretched in strange ways after they left. Minutes felt like hours. Hours slipped by without edges. The drug loosened its grip slowly, starting with my fingertips. A faint tingling. Pins and needles. Pain I welcomed because it meant I was coming back. I kept my eyes closed. I slowed my breathing. I needed them to believe I was still gone. Sometime later, the door creaked again. Lighter footsteps this time. Lena's perfume reached me before her voice. She stood there longer than necessary, watching, waiting. Still out, she murmured to herself. The door closed. When I was sure she was gone, I opened my eyes. The room was dim, lit by streetlight bleeding through old curtains. My body felt like it had been dragged across gravel, but I could move. Barely. That's when I saw it. On the floor beside my bed, half hidden near the nightstand, was a small white card. I slid off the mattress, my legs shaking, and picked it up with clumsy fingers. A name, a title, nothing else. A private investigator. My heart started racing again, this time with clarity instead of panic. Lena wasn't clever enough to bring a stranger into this. She followed instructions. She didn't design plans. Someone else had. Before I could think further, I heard my father's voice echo down the hallway, sharp, controlled. Awake in a way that meant decisions had already been made. Is it done? He asked. A pause. Good. The hearing's soon. Keep her calm until then. Calm. My stomach turned. This wasn't about a night or a mistake. There was paperwork involved. Timelines. A future where I didn't get to speak for myself. I waited until the house went quiet again. Getting dressed felt like moving underwater. Every sound felt too loud. Floorboards creaked like accusations. I slipped past my parents' room, past Lena's door, listening to her steady breathing on the other side. The front door opened with a soft click. Cold air hit my face. I didn't stop walking until I reached my car. I drove for 20 minutes before my hands stopped shaking enough to think. I pulled into a small roadside stop and sat there, engine off, breathing through the fog still clinging to my head. I took out the card and stared at it. Calling felt dangerous. Not calling felt worse. The phone rang 3 times before someone answered. Groggy at first, then alert when I said my name. You were in my room, I told him. You checked my pulse. Silence. You're awake, he said finally. You're not supposed to be. I heard everything I replied. My sister, my father, the hearing. Another pause, heavier this time. Then you need to listen, he said, because what they're doing to you isn't a family issue. It's legal, and it's already in motion. I closed my eyes. For years, I'd believed being invisible kept me safe. That night, I understood the truth. It made me the easiest target, and if I wanted my life back, I wasn't going to get it by staying quiet anymore. Marcus didn't sugarcoat anything. What your father filed, he told me over coffee later that morning in Virginia, is a guardianship petition. If it goes through, he controls your finances, your decisions, even where you live. I stared at the steam rising from my mug. "On what grounds incapacity?" he said. "Financial irresponsibility, emotional instability." I almost laughed. Almost. For months, Marcus continued, "He's been building a paper trail. Payments, bills, accounts opened and closed in your name. Money moved around to make it look like you were spiraling." "And my sister?" I asked. He hesitated. "She thinks she's protecting your parents. She believes you were taking money. Your father showed her documents, forged ones." Something in my chest tightened. Not sympathy, not forgiveness, just clarity. Marcus slid a folder across the table. "There's more. But if we're going to stop this, we need a lawyer. Today." That's how Sandra Chen entered my life. She didn't waste time on comfort. She asked precise questions, took notes without looking up. When I told her about the night in my bedroom, her jaw tightened just enough to notice. "This isn't just financial abuse," she said. "It's coercive control, and the timing matters." "When is the hearing Friday?" I said. She checked her watch. "Then we work fast." That afternoon, back in my apartment, I finally opened the tin box my grandmother had given me. Inside was a folded document and a letter yellowed at the edges. Her handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. She wrote about my father filing false statements after her death, about money that was supposed to go to me, about her fear that he'd never stop if no one challenged him. The document underneath was her original will. Sandra read it twice. Then she exhaled slowly. "This changes everything." By Thursday night, we had assembled the story my father never thought I'd be able to tell. Records showing the flow of money, proof the accounts tied back to him, a timeline that made his narrative collapse under its own weight. Friday morning, I walked into the courthouse wearing a navy suit I'd owned for years, but never felt ready to wear. My father was already there, seated confidently, arm draped over the back of the chair like he owned the room. My mother sat beside him, hands folded, eyes down. Lena was nowhere to be seen. Richard looked up when I entered. For the first time in my life, he didn't hide his shock. "You shouldn't be here," he said quietly as I passed. I didn't respond. I sat down next to Sandra and placed my hands flat on the table. They didn't shake. The hearing started the way he expected. His attorney spoke about concern, about family, about a daughter who had lost her way. Documents were passed forward, carefully curated, selective. Then Sandra stood. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush. She pointed out the incorrect address listed as my residence, the missing notifications, the unusual timing of financial movements. She used the word misrepresentation, then manipulation, then fraud. The judge's expression changed. Sandra asked that the court review the original while submitted into evidence. She explained how the funds my father claimed I had mishandled were never mine to begin with. Finally, she asked me to speak. I answered every question clearly: my job, my budget, my savings, my understanding of my own affairs. The evaluator looked confused. Why was this petition filed at all? The room went quiet. The judge dismissed the guardianship petition on the spot and ordered a formal investigation into how it had been filed. Richard stood up too quickly. "This is a misunderstanding." "Sit down," the judge said. I watched something crumble in him then. Not fear of consequences, fear of exposure. Outside the courtroom, Lena found me. Her face was pale. "You lied," she said. "You let us think." "No," I replied. "I stopped correcting you." She opened her mouth to argue, closed it again. For the first time, she looked unsure of which script to follow. Over the next weeks, the truth came out piece by piece. Investigators traced the money, the forged signatures, the accounts linked back to my father. Everything he'd accused me of doing, he'd been doing himself. When the charges were filed, he didn't call me. He didn't apologize. He claimed I'd manipulated everyone against him. At his sentencing, he spoke once. "My daughter is unstable," he said. "She's always been jealous." The judge listened, then responded calmly. "The evidence suggests otherwise." The sentence was handed down, a long one. Lena's case followed. The court acknowledged her role and her reliance on what she'd been told. She received probation and mandatory counseling. She approached me afterward, eyes red. I didn't know she whispered. I thought I was helping. "You didn't ask," I said. "That matters." She nodded like the weight of that truth had finally landed. As for my mother, she said nothing. She watched. And for once, her silence wasn't protection. It was consequence. I stood alone outside the courthouse when it was over, the air sharp with winter. I expected to feel victorious. Instead, I felt steady. The doorway that night didn't end me. It revealed them. And for the first time, I wasn't walking away invisible. The weeks after the hearing moved quietly like the world was exhaling after holding its breath too long. The investigation unfolded exactly as the evidence said it would. My father's story unraveled on paper first, then in court. The money he claimed I'd mishandled was traced back to accounts he controlled. The forged signatures were confirmed. The pattern was impossible to ignore. The sentence came down on a gray morning, long enough to make it clear this wasn't a misunderstanding or a family dispute. It was a crime. When they led him away, he never looked at me. Not once. I realized then he never really had. Lena's outcome was different. Probation, mandatory counseling, consequences without absolution. She stood outside the courthouse afterward, smaller somehow, stripped of the certainty she'd borrowed from him for years. She said she was sorry. I believed she meant it. That didn't mean things could go back to what they were. My mother moved out of the house she'd hidden inside for decades. Silence no longer protected her. It simply followed her somewhere else. I returned to Virginia and bought a small place near the water. Mornings were quiet, honest. I slept without locking my door out of fear. Justice didn't feel like triumph. It felt like finally standing on solid ground and knowing no one could pull it out from under me again. For a long time, I believed staying quiet was the same as staying safe. I was wrong. Family doesn't get a free pass to control a race or silence you. Love isn't proven through obedience, and survival isn't selfish. If you've ever been made to feel unstable, ungrateful, or invisible just for protecting yourself, know this: you're not imagining it. If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss the next story where truth finally wins.